Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. Former CNN anchor Don Lemon has been arrested, taken into custody by federal agents in connection to a protest that disrupted a Minnesota church service. He now faces conspiracy and civil rights charges. 3 million pages of Epstein files being made public today. What the Justice Department says about this latest batch. Senator Lindsey Graham is holding up a government funding vote and demanding the Senate vote to criminalize the conduct of officials who run sanctuary cities. Trump taps a Fed insider and a sharp critic to lead the central bank. Will it mark a shift toward lower interest rates? We hear the personal account of someone whose life was changed when he opted to change schools and why he now advocates for all children to have that opportunity. Russia agrees to stop striking energy infrastructure in Kyiv. President Trump made the request as many residents are left without heating while temperatures are dropping to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Panama has delivered a major blow to China. The country's Supreme Court ruling will shift control of the canal out of Beijing's hands and closer to the U.S.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Senate Democrats and the White House have reached a deal to fund the government. The Senate is expected to vote on the new funding package tonight, but a partial shutdown is still on the horizon. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
The new deal reached in between the White House and Senate Democrats is to pass 5 out of the 6 appropriation bills that have already cleared the House of Representatives and to fund the Department of Homeland Security for an additional 2 weeks at current levels of spending.
If Republicans are serious about the very reasonable demands Democrats have put forward on ICE, then there is no good reason we can't come together very quickly to produce legislation.
The new funding package would need to be approved by the House of Representatives, which is in recess until early next week. And House Democrats have already threatened to hold funding for the Department of Homeland Security past the 2-week continuing resolution.
We have to deal with the issue of reining ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in with the fierce urgency of now. And a 2-week window will evaluate whether that's sufficient time, but there's urgency to deal with this issue.
Senator Lindsey Graham is holding up the vote in the Senate, demanding guarantees on a vote to criminalize the conduct of local officials who run sanctuary cities in violation of federal law.
State and local officials openly defying federal law that's been on the books for decades, incentivizing more illegal immigration, massive taxpayer ripoff, and a breakdown of law and order.
Senator Graham is also pushing to include provisions in the new funding package to allow for lawmakers to sue the federal government for illegal surveillance on their communications.
You took the Arctic frost language of the Senate and took it all out. You could have called me about the 500,000. I'd be glad to work with you. You jammed me. Speaker Johnson, I won't forget this.
The Republican senator distanced himself from the White House and pushed back against Speaker of the House Mike Johnson.
I don't work for the White House. They're my political allies. I'm close to President Trump. I don't work for him. I don't work for the House.
Government funding expires Friday at midnight, so even if the Senate passes a funding package, we would still see a partial government shutdown over the weekend. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
More and more illegal immigrant children who enter the U.S. unaccompanied are being located. The Trump administration has an update on their operations. Border Czar Tom Homan announced today that ICE, the FBI, and HHS worked together to locate more than 145,000 unaccompanied illegal immigrant children. According to a DHS Inspector General report from August 2024, some 323,000 such children were unaccounted for in the U.S. Holman said they entered under the Biden administration, were turned over to unvetted sponsors, and the government lost track of them. The DHS has said recently that many of these children were allowed to be placed with sponsors who were smugglers and sex traffickers. The The border czar said federal agents were able to locate the children after working through hundreds of thousands of leads and numerous investigations. He said the Trump administration is committed to locating these children, and the federal agencies will continue doing so. Journalist Don Lemon is arrested after a disruption at a Minnesota church service. The Department of Justice has charged him with conspiracy to deprive rights and interfering of someone's First Amendment rights. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
You have the right to worship freely and safely. If you violate that sacred right, we are coming after you.
Attorney General Pam Bondi issues a warning. This is after the arrest of journalist Don Lemon by federal agents early Friday morning. Lemon was seen filming and entering a Minnesota church with activists who are accused of disrupting a Sunday service earlier this month, looking for a pastor who allegedly works for ICE. Lemon's attorney issued a statement. Don has been a journalist for 30 years, and his constitutionally protected work in Minneapolis was no different than what he has always done. The Department of Justice also announced the arrest of 3 other individuals involved in the incident. This is along with 3 who were arrested and charged last week. Lemon appeared in a Los Angeles federal court on Friday. And ICE continues its operation in May, announcing the arrest of over 200 criminal illegal immigrants over 5 days. On Thursday, Maine Senator Susan Collins stated that no more large-scale ICE operations would be held in the state, following a conversation with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
I have strongly recommended to her that there be a pause so that we can have a far more targeted approach.
Collins also said that ICE and Customs and Border Patrol will continue their normal operations that have been going on there for many years. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem is responding to calls for her firing. She addressed criticism she's been facing since 2 fatal shootings by federal agents in Minneapolis, speaking to Fox News yesterday.
Well, these radicals are attacking me, but I'm just doing my job. I'm following the law, enforcing the laws like President Trump promised that he would do to keep people safe in this country. We're going to continue to go after these criminals.
Among those calling for her removal are House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and California Governor Gavin Newsom. 2 Republican senators, North Carolina's Thom Tillis and Alaska's Lisa Murkowski, have also called for her removal. President Trump has said he has no plans to fire Noem, telling reporters earlier this week she is doing a very good job. In her conversation on Fox yesterday, Noem also spoke about new videos that have emerged of Alex Preddy, the man shot by agents last week. The videos show Preddy 11 days before his death swearing at ICE agents and attacking their vehicle. Noem commented on Preddy saying, quote, "Clearly there's a history there of attacking our law enforcement officers and our CBP and ICE officers." Anti-ICE demonstrations are expected across the country today, including a student walkout in New York City and a protest in Minneapolis. One organizer from the University of Minnesota's Black Student Union said the strike aims to build lasting momentum. The demonstrations come as border czar Tom Homan said immigration enforcement in Minneapolis could be scaled back. He said it would depend on cooperation from state and city officials in honoring ICE detainers. And the Supreme Court will hear arguments on April 1st over whether President Trump's efforts to end birthright citizenship is constitutional. The case follows an executive order Trump issued on Inauguration Day last January. A court order blocked that last year, ruling that Trump's directive violated the Constitution's 14th Amendment. Passed in the aftermath of the American Civil War, the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The Trump administration argues that the 14th Amendment was originally intended to repudiate the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision, which originally denied citizenship to African Americans. The administration argues that protection does not extend to all persons born in the United States. Joining us now to discuss is Mark Trammell, CEO of the Center for American Liberty and attorney. Mark, thank you for joining us. Now, first, so far, the actual court records haven't been publicly released. So, we can only speak on the currently available information until we know more. Attorney General Pam Bondi said 4 people, including Don Lemon, were arrested and that those arrested were part of a coordinated attack. Does this part coordinated make a difference in this case, in your view?
Well, I think it depends on which federal statute the charges have been brought under. So under the FACE Act, whether it's coordinated or not, if someone interferes with an American's access to either an abortion clinic or a house of worship, they can be held in violation of the FACE Act. If we're looking at the Klan Act, that does encompass this conspiracy, this idea that if you conspire with others to deprive Americans of their constitutional rights, then you can be in violation of the Klan Act. To your point, we don't know exactly what Don Lemon has been charged with yet. These records have not been released as of the time of this broadcast. So I think we're all waiting kind of on pins and needles to see exactly what charges have been brought and perhaps even what information we're not privy to yet through social media and through legacy media, but maybe the Justice Department has uncovered through search warrants as well.
So, Mark, I want to talk to you about Don Lemon's actions. His attorney said that his work in Minneapolis was no different than what he has done always. So he called the arrest an unprecedented attack on the First Amendment. So based on what we know, based on public information, videos, clips, is that what you're seeing?
No, I think that's pure gaslighting by his attorney. The First Amendment doesn't give a journalist the right to enter into a house of worship and to intimidate congregants and to shut it down. Under the FACE Act, that is illegal. The FACE Act would also prevent Don Lemon or any other person who identifies as a journalist from entering into an abortion clinic and shouting in the faces of women who are seeking an abortion in that clinic. Both acts would be illegal under the FACE Act. There's no super right as a journalist. And that First Amendment right of the press extends to really anyone who is seeking to report on a story. It doesn't just extend to people who are, credentialed by legacy media. So if someone wants to, on like a public sidewalk, record what's going on and report it, that's protected activity so long as it's peaceful. What's not protected is trespassing and violating federal law. And it looks like, based on the information that we have before us today, based on videos that have gone viral, that Don Lemon went too far and beyond what the scope of the First Amendment protects.
So it looks like we actually have the charges now. DHS actually emailed NTD citing these charges. So let me just read this to you, Mark. Don Lemon is being charged with 18 U.S.C. 241, conspiracy to deprive rights, and 18 U.S.C. 248, violation of the FACE Act, interfering by force of someone's First Amendment rights. Can you just interpret that for us? What are these charges? What do they mean? And what are the consequences?
Yeah, so the FACE Act, it protects access, Americans' access, both to abortion clinics and to houses of worship. The penalty for violation of the FACE Act, first time violation, is punishable by fine and or up to a year imprisonment. The conspiracy to deprive Americans of their constitutional right, that's the Klan Act. And that's a much more severe penalty. You can actually go to prison for up to 10 years if you're found in violation of the Klan Act. So the fact that Don Lemon has been charged with violation of both of these federal statutes is very significant.
So do you see this case having wider implications of this high-profile arrest for future protests and for setting the boundaries on what is and isn't acceptable with these anti-ICE protests?
Well, I think that any time that the law is enforced, it's intended to also have a deterring effect, right? We'll see how that plays out in Minnesota. There's a lot of protests happening in Minnesota that are far beyond what is protected under the First Amendment. And I think so long as people are getting away with it and not being charged, they're going to continue to break the law, and they're going to continue to riot, and they're going to continue to destroy property. And we have to hold them accountable. So I'm I'm pleased that the Justice Department has taken this issue so seriously. It appears as though they've done their due diligence. They've investigated this, I would imagine, through search warrants, and we'll see what happens in trial. But I think this is a really important step forward in protecting every American's freedom of worship.
Okay, Mark, really appreciate you giving us your analysis on this situation. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
A Manhattan federal judge on Friday took the death penalty off the table for Luigi Mangione. She dismissed 2 counts from the incident that she said weren't tied to an underlying violent crime. Meanwhile, the judge allowed evidence found in Mangione's backpack to be used at trial. NTD's Arlene Richards has more details.
Federal prosecutors can't seek the death penalty against Luigi Mangione in the alleged killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, a judge ruled Friday. Mangione was accused of gunning down a health insurance executive outside a hotel in Manhattan in December 2024. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. At the outset of a 39-page opinion, Judge Margaret Garnett said, quote, "The court would be remiss not to note at the outset the apparent absurdity of the inquiry," referring to the defense's argument that the alleged killing wasn't a crime of violence. She said, quote, "No one could seriously question that this is violent criminal conduct," referring to the prosecution's allegations that Mangione carefully planned the killing, then stalked the CEO before gunning him down. But Garnett explained that she was bound by the Supreme Court's precedent over the last 20 years that she said requires her to view the matter from the least serious conduct.
Just wanted to thank the court for this incredible decision.
Garnett left in place stalking charges that carry a maximum punishment of life in prison. In order to seek the death penalty, prosecutors needed to show that Mangione killed Thompson while committing another crime of violence. Stalking with the intent to kill and planning the killing don't fit the definition, which requires actual violent physical force. In a separate order, Garnett ruled that prosecutors can use evidence found in Mangione's backpack during his arrest, including a 9mm handgun and a notebook allegedly detailing how he would kill Thompson. Taking the death penalty off the table means the trial will begin in October. Jury selection is set to begin in September. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The latest batch of the Epstein files will be made public today. Here's Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche speaking from the Justice Department.
Today we are producing more than 3 million pages, including more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. In total, that means that the department produced approximately 3.5 million pages in compliance with the Act.
Blanche said some of the files were not taken by Epstein or someone around him, but were found on Epstein's devices. Justice Department said it did not release 6 million pages of files that either contain personal identification information of victims or depictions of child pornography, death, physical abuse, or injury. Blanche said they are protecting the identity of the victims by redacting the face of every woman except Ghislaine Maxwell. He added, they did not remove any images of men unless it was impossible to remove the woman without redacting the man. Today's release came after President Trump signed the Epstein Files Transparency Act last November. The department said it's committed to protecting victims of sex and human trafficking. Major updates this morning from the White House. President Trump says he is nominating former Federal Reserve Governor Kevin Warsh to become the next chair of the central bank. In a Truth Social post hours ago, the president called Warsh a longtime friend and someone with deep experience in finance, including time working alongside billionaire investor Stanley Druckenmiller. Here's what Trump wrote. I have known Kevin for a long period of time and have no doubt that he will go down as one of the great Fed chairmen, maybe the best. On top of everything else, he is central casting and he will never let you down. This pick comes as the president has been sharply critical of current Fed Chair Jerome Powell, saying interest rates are too high and should come down by 2 to 3 percentage points, arguing the U.S. is paying too much to borrow. The nomination follows months of public speculation, with Warsh, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett, Fed Governor Christopher Waller, and Wall Street's Rick Rader all being mentioned as potential picks. If confirmed by the Senate, Kevin Warsh could take over from Powell when his term ends in May. Warsh is no stranger to the Fed. He served on the board of governors from 2006 to 2011 and was the youngest person ever appointed to that position at just 35. Trump was talking about his Fed pick yesterday. Take a listen.
Just an outstanding person, and a person that won't be too surprising to people. A lot of people think that this is somebody that could have been there a few years ago. It's going to be somebody that is very respected, somebody that's known to everybody in the financial world, and I think it's going to be a very good choice. I hope so.
And in another post this morning, the president praised White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett, who's been one of the names floated as a potential Fed chair pick. Trump called Hassett's work outstanding, saying he's doing such a great job that he wants him to stay right where he is. And joining us now to discuss is E.J. Antony, chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. So good afternoon to you, E.J. Trump says Warsh will go down as one of the great Fed chairmen, maybe the best. Your initial reactions to this pick?
Well, I think once again, the president's right. Warsh is a fabulous pick for this role. I've had the pleasure to actually discuss monetary policy with him on several different occasions and go really in depth into the operations of the Fed, and not just discussing all of the different policy mistakes that the Fed has made. You know, it's one thing to Monday morning quarterback, but it's another thing to have solutions to the problems, which I can tell you Kevin Warsh does. On top of that, if we actually do roll back the clock to things like the global financial crisis, and you listen to what he was saying back then, history has proven him correct. And that's not just a one-off. That has happened time and time again. And I am confident that if Kevin Warsh becomes Fed chairman, which I believe he will get confirmed, we are going to see history prove him right time and time again, not just as a member of the Board of Governors, but as the chairman.
All right, so let's go into details then. You said you spoke with Warsh in detail about monetary policy. So what kind of changes in philosophy, specifically at the Fed, might we see if Warsh is confirmed?
Well, one is the fact that you don't need to have a balance sheet like they do today. In other words, the Fed owns trillions upon trillions of dollars in assets that it doesn't need to. We're operating the balance sheet as if we're still in the middle of COVID, or we're still in the middle of the global financial crisis, or maybe the long-term capital management meltdown back from the 90s, whatever the case may be. We are operating one part of the Federal Reserve as if it's an emergency, and then we're operating another part of the Fed, namely interest rates, as if we still have the sky-high inflation from the Biden administration, which clearly isn't the case. Inflation has come way down. And so he understands that you need to essentially unwind the policies that were started with Ben Bernanke and were put on steroids.
So I wanted you to take a look at this clip of Warsh talking about the Federal Reserve in an interview with Fox Business. Just take a quick listen to this.
I think until there's regime change at the Fed, until there's new people running the Fed, a new operating framework, they're stuck with their old mistakes.
So, you know, Warsh is just one vote if he's confirmed, but Trump, believes other officials will change their minds, whether that's supporting rate cuts or other things. Do you think Warsh himself will be enough to make substantiated or significant changes at the Fed, or would a larger regime change be needed, as Warsh put it?
Well, I think the Fed chairman is a key component to that larger regime change. The Fed chairman has a tremendous amount of sway in terms of the operations of the Fed, who is actually working there. You know, they have 300-something PhD economists at the Fed, all of them making mistakes. I mean, it's absolutely absurd that they're allowed to use the kinds of failed Keynesian models, these Phillips curve models that they do, where they think if there's economic growth, they need to suffocate it to prevent inflation, when we all know it's government spending, borrowing, and printing too much money that has caused inflation. And again, Kevin Warsh really understands these things. Nobody's, I think, got a better grasp of them than he does. And with him at the helm of the Fed, I think you would see the deep structural reforms throughout that institution that are needed to really return it to sound monetary policy. It's not just a matter of setting interest rates. It's not just a matter of one man's vote on the board. This is much deeper and much more systemic.
Okay, let me read you some reactions from U.S. lawmakers here. Senator Thom Tillis says, protecting the independence of the Federal Reserve from political interference or legal intimidation is non-negotiable. And I have one from Senator Elizabeth Warren saying that this nomination is the latest step in Trump's attempt to seize control of the Fed. Can we just get your comments here? Can you address potential concerns of the independence of the central bank and what the lawmakers are saying?
Sure. Well, first off, both Thom Tillis and Elizabeth Warren are just jokes in their own right, if we can be honest about it. And Elizabeth Warren was the one who signed an open letter, by the way, to Jerome Powell, essentially telling him he needed to cut rates and he needed to do it in a big way, not just a small interest rate cut, but a large one. She wanted a 75 basis point cut when Biden was in office. It's only now that Trump is in office that Elizabeth Warren doesn't want interest rates to come down. So please tell me, Pocahontas, who is actually the one being political here? Clearly, it's her. Unfortunately, now, likewise with Thom Tillis, he hates President Trump as well, and he is letting his own political views get in the way of the truth, which is the fact that Jerome Powell was asked for information from Congress. He refused to give it. The matter was referred to the DOJ. The DOJ asked Jerome Powell for that information, and it was once again refused. Jerome Powell, as an attorney, he's not an economist, as an attorney, as a lawyer, he should know better, and he knows that if he ignores requests for information from Congress and from the DOJ, it will ultimately result in a formal request, the subpoena that he received. And that's exactly what happened. So he is the one who is politicizing this issue. If Jerome Powell has nothing to hide, if the Fed did nothing wrong in terms of these massive cost overruns with their renovations, then they should simply be above board about it, provide the information that lawmakers and that the DOJ requested in the first place, and the whole thing goes away.
Okay, EJ, well said. That's our time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
A major setback for China's influence in the Western Hemisphere, this time in Panama. The country's Supreme Court has ended a contract allowing a Hong Kong-based company to operate key ports in the Panama Canal. The ruling on Thursday comes after mounting pressure and growing U.S. security concerns.
Panama's Supreme Court ruled that the decades-long contract with CK Hutchison is unconstitutional. As a result, the Chinese company will be forced to stop operating the canal ports. It's a major win for President Trump, who argued that China's growing footprint around the canal poses a national security threat. He warned that China's growing influence over its ports could let Beijing block or pressure U.S. military operations and trade ships in a crisis. Panama's president says the country plans to keep the ports running with a temporary operator before launching a new bidding process with revised terms. Since CK Hutchison took over in the late 1990s, Panama has lost more than $1.3 billion in revenue. That's according to a government audit. The ruling also comes amid U.S.-China tensions over port dominance. Last year, the Chinese company agreed to sell dozens of ports worldwide. A business association led by U.S.-based BlackRock and Mediterranean Shipping intended to buy them for about $23 billion. China pushed back on the deal, aiming to maintain control over the ports. Despite China's presence in the region, the U.S. remains Panama's top investor and trading partner. Notably, Panama pulled out of China's Belt and Road Initiative last year, signaling a shift back toward Washington.
Russia agrees to an American request to stop striking energy infrastructure in Kyiv. Temperatures are dropping to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and many are left without heating in their apartments. President Trump says that's why he made a direct request to Russia to halt strikes on energy sites. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest.
They said they've never experienced cold like that. I personally asked President Putin not to fire into Kiev and the
President Trump recently said he asked Moscow to stop aiming at Kiev's energy supply. Russian strikes on energy infrastructure leave many Ukrainians without heating in their apartments, with temperatures dropping to 0 degrees Fahrenheit.
President Trump made a personal request to President Putin to refrain from striking Kiev until Sunday in order to create favorable conditions for negotiations.
The spokesman on Friday confirmed that Russia agreed to Trump's request. However, unlike the Kremlin, Trump didn't mention the Sunday deadline. And forecasts actually show that the weather in Kiev is going to get colder starting Sunday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says there are no exact terms of the temporary energy ceasefire.
I am grateful to the American side for their efforts, and we hope the United States will be able to secure this.
Residents in Kiev are now preparing for a cold weekend ahead. One woman says she doesn't think Russia will follow the ceasefire.
Putin does not comply. He has never complied, not even with his own ideas.
Putin recently invited Zelensky to a meeting in Moscow. Zelensky now rejected the meeting, saying it's impossible for him to go to Moscow, while adding that Putin is welcome to meet him in Kiev. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
President Trump says he wants to talk to Iran's leadership as tensions rise following the regime's actions against protesters.
Have you had any conversations with Iran in the last few days, and are you planning on any?
I have had, and I am planning on it, yeah. We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them. Okay?
Can you say what the message was that you shared with Iranian?
Well, I told them two things. Number one, no nuclear. And number two, stop killing protesters.
The State Department announced yesterday that Secretary Rubio revoked the U.S. residence privileges for senior Iranian officials and their families. This comes after the Iranian regime's deadly response to protesters, as Iran International now reports that more than 36,000 people have been killed. And Iran's foreign minister says Tehran is ready to resume nuclear talks with the U.S. Joining us to discuss is Taylor Hathorn, visiting fellow at the Independent Women's Center for American Safety and Security. Taylor, good afternoon. Always good to have you here. So to start off, I want you to have a listen to what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said about this yesterday.
Same thing with Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
So, Taylor, in the backdrop of all this, is a U.S. military buildup in the Gulf with speculation of a potential strike on Iran, right? So where do you see these negotiation efforts going, and what's at stake?
The goal in any conflict is always deterrence, right? So we don't want to come in guns a-blazing just because we have the power to completely wipe out the IRGC. Doesn't mean that this administration is going to take that and run with it. They are always going to try to work for deterrence first. However, I would like to remind people that the Iranian regime and the Ayatollah is responsible for countless American deaths around the world through Hezbollah and other proxies and Hamas. And so they're really not someone that we can negotiate with too well. So I got to give the president and this administration kudos for trying to work with them, because quite frankly, I wouldn't trust anything that they say.
You know, the death toll reported from this Iranian protest is just simply devastating. And but the bravery the Iranians are showing in the face of the regime's clampdown was remarkable in contrast. So in your latest article on EV Magazine, you say the women of Iran are braver than the institutions meant to protect them. I'm wondering if you can talk to us more about that.
I really want to set the stage here and help people understand that these people that are protesting in the streets are really fighting with their bodies and with sticks against a tyrannical regime that is using snipers from forces outside of Iran, by the way. A lot of the people in the militia that they're pulling in are from Iraq or from Afghanistan, Pakistan. They don't even speak Farsi in many cases, and they're assassinating these people in their own country. And so the regime is absolutely wreaking havoc and devastation on the people of Iran. The women that are protesting in the street, I mean, you can look at the video and the footage that you guys are showing. It's devastating. You know, there are men, women, and children that are being murdered at a rate that is higher. And I talked about this in my article. It is a higher daily kill rate in Iran right now than it was in the Holocaust. And that is not by any means to minimize what happened during the atrocities of the Holocaust, but it's to put it into perspective what these people are going through. And really, the Western media isn't talking about it. The United Nations, who has something to say about every single conflict around the world, can't seem to find too much of a voice for the women of Iran at the moment. And it really makes you wonder why. What is it about this narrative that makes the United Nations, Doctors Without Borders, celebrities like Mark Ruffalo, who seems to have some kind of pin that he wears at some awards show for every single person in conflict, that except for the Iranian people?
So you bring up the UN. What do you say to the fact that Iran, once sat on the UN Human Rights Council, and China, one of the world's worst human rights offenders, currently holds a seat?
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the international community. It's embarrassing for the United Nations. And it really puts into perspective why recently President Trump had the United States pull out of over 31 different United Nations subcommittees, because it's a use of our taxpayer dollar. They're not effective. And in many cases, they're bolstering these regimes and their behaviors. I mean, in what world does Iran and China and Russia get to talk about human rights and security around the world? I mean, it's absolutely embarrassing for the United Nations, and they should be ashamed of the work that they do, and they should be ashamed of the fact that they're not following through on their charter.
So, I mean, do you think these international bodies can improve in some way, or has the ship sailed on that? Is there anything, for example, can be done to advance the security of Iranians who are protesting?
I am a skeptic by nature, but I'm also equally an optimist. You know, I would like to be able to have the United Nations and the leaders in the UN come together, much like they did a couple of months ago in their talks, and talk about how they are not fulfilling their mission. That was stated multiple times in every single leader speech at the UN. We failed, we've fallen short, we're not doing well. Okay, accountability matters, and being, self-aware matters, but what is the next step? You have an opportunity of the United Nations now, not just to impose, feckless sanctions that really don't matter. You have an opportunity to really make sure that the people of Iran are supported. And the world is silent right now. Legacy media is absolutely silent. If this was happening in any other area in the world, would they be talking about it? And the answer is yes. So I think for the people of Iran, they have to be sitting there wondering, why is it that we can have a Islamic regime that is inflicting terror upon not just Christians and not just agnostics in the area, but against Muslims also? Why is it that other people's voices in other conflicts around the world matter, but ours don't matter to the UN?
Just finally, Taylor, President Trump has suggested that his new Board of Peace could potentially replace the UN. What do you think about that? Do you think through his actions, he's giving people more hope than the current global institutions we have in place?
President Trump and this administration are problem solvers, right? So they look at an issue and they're like, something isn't working, so what can we do to make it work? And an institution that is as old as the United Nations, that has shown time and time again that they are not going to put their money where their mouth is. They're not going to step up and do what needs to be done for the international community to make sure that there are no new world wars, that there is global order, that there is not a lack of humanity that is shown in these countries, and that it's not tolerated. And I think what President Trump and this administration is saying, if the United Nations and other world bodies are not going to do their job, then we are going to partner with other nations who have the same values as us: freedom of religion, rule of law, the concept of democracy and democratic privileges and freedoms that we value in the West. A lot of these nations that are on this Board of Peace that have signed on to these agreements are working towards that. Is this idea perfect? Absolutely not. I see holes in it, because I think that that requires every single nation who's going to participate in this to really give up something and to kind of analyze themselves and look at what's happening in their own nations and make sure that they're up to par to be able to tell other people how to make sure that they are treating other people well and treating their nations well. So time will tell to see if this effort is effective, and I look forward to seeing the results and the output for that, because I can tell you right now, it's not happening at the United Nations.
Okay, Taylor, always enjoy speaking to you, and I wanted to tell you that was a great article that you wrote, and I encourage our viewers, if they have time, just take a quick look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the Trump administration took action on several fronts, touching on China, Cuba, and Venezuela. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the latest, including the president's warning to the UK over ties with Beijing.
Prime Minister.
President Trump is warning the United Kingdom against expanding business ties with China, calling the move very dangerous.
Well, it's very dangerous for them to do that, and it's even more dangerous, I think, for Canada to get into business with China. Canada is not doing well. They're doing very poorly, and you can't look at China as the answer.
Trump made the remarks as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer visited Beijing.
Cuba is also in focus under a new executive order from President Trump.
It enables putting tariffs on goods from countries that sell or otherwise provide oil to Cuba. The order says the Cuban regime aligns itself with numerous hostile countries like China, Russia, and Iran, hosting their military and intelligence capabilities. It says Cuba provides safe haven for transnational terrorist groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas. It also says the regime persecutes and tortures political opponents, denies free speech and press, profits corruptly from the Cuban people's misery, and incites chaos by spreading communist ideology across the region. In Venezuela, acting President Delcy Rodriguez signed into law a major reform of the country's oil legislation yesterday. The step followed a phone call from President Trump concerning the nation's commercial airspace.
We are talking about lifting restrictions on Venezuela's commercial airspace so that all airlines that need to come, and investors that need to come can come.
American citizens will be very shortly able to go to Venezuela, and they'll be safe there.
American Airlines confirmed plans to resume service to Venezuela for the first time in more than 6 years. Late yesterday, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy rescinded a 2019 order blocking U.S. flights to the country after President Trump directed him to do so.
In his directive, Duffy said the continued suspension of air service is no longer required by the public interest. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Many UK-based human rights groups are expressing unhappiness over UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping on Thursday. Joining us now from the UK is Rehma Mahmood, the Executive Director of Stop Uyghur Genocide. Rehma, thank you so much for joining us today. So first off, can I just get your first reactions to Starmer's meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping and what's come out of it?
Thank you very much for having me. So the reaction from me, from many other Uyghur community members, feeling total betrayal and dismay and upset. This week, everywhere the people are commemorating the Holocaust, and where our Prime Minister traveled to China, shaking hands with the men who committing genocide against my people.
So the community there, how is the community feeling? You said you're feeling disappointment. What about the feelings of groups?
As I said, we all feel the same, feel being betrayed. Because when a Labour Party in opposition, they recognized what is happening to my people as genocide, crimes against humanity. And after they came to power, became government, that took complete U-turn. Now, since 2018 is the first time a UK Prime Minister visited China. And when human rights situation is becoming worse, and not only in the region where Uyghurs live, in Tibet, in Hong Kong, and in many places, including the Chinese dissidents as well. And under this kind of circumstances, seeing a UK Prime Minister who is a human rights lawyer shaking hand with those responsible for killings, murder, imprisoning and detaining millions of Uyghur and other Muslim people, it really shameful.
Okay, what's at stake here, and how important is it for the Prime Minister to actually really address these issues? And if he did, what would be the impact of that?
I do believe China should have been held accountable for the crimes they have been committing. It's not like giving them a reward propaganda platform to go there and visit talking about business. As activist, as someone who is Uyghur, also suffered so much from what has been happening to my people, and I strongly condemn this visit. But of course, after going there, we don't know how much he really managed to achieve. We know when you're talking to Chinese so-called diplomats or the president, it's like you are talking to a wall. They're not going to really take your view. For them, it's what they think matter, what they believe is matter.
Okay, I want to touch on the mega embassy that was just approved ahead of the Prime Minister's visit to China. I know your organization has expressed a lot of concern over this embassy, with fears of expanded transnational repression. Can you just expand a little bit on this issue for us?
First of all, rewarding China, the CCP, this mega embassy, when there are so much warnings against national security and transnational repression and many other things, was shocking. And secondly, as being Uyghur, we suffer most extreme form of transnational repression. So having this mega embassy, that means increased so-called diplomats, those are spies, and also operate illegally in many ways. We did have reports in past years about secret police stations in the UK soil and many other countries. So it's not like fiction. This is a real fear that we know it's real, including Hong Kongers and Tibetans and many people. Also, this high-tech surveillance that my country, the East Turkestan or Uyghur region, used as a laboratory to develop the most sophisticated facial recognition, voice recognition cameras, and that has been exported to many other authoritarian regimes. Having this mega embassy, I mean that land, that place will belong to China. They could install all these sophisticated cameras, and also will restrict our ability to protest and many other things. So it's really, really unbelievable for the UK government approve this mega embassy.
Okay, Rayma, I know you and your community are very familiar with the evils committed by the Chinese regime. I want to ask you, what would you say to those who aren't very aware of the atrocities and the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party and don't share your concerns? What would you say to this group of people?
I would like to say, unlike Russia's overt military aggression, China advances through subtle, long-term, and concrete strategies, uses smiling diplomacy to, masks more dangerous and harder to confront. And we know this, although you don't see the bombs are shelling, in the region where I come from, you don't see people are dying, but they are all dying silently, quietly, and being tortured, being forced to work in factories, all around China as slaves, producing the goods that tainting the entire supply chains in the world. The reason the goods are so cheap because they're using forced labor, using slave labor, and we are all supporting by buying these goods. And therefore, we must condemn, we must see China, the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, as criminal, as murderous, as absolute horrible regime that we should stand up against.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rahima. I just have one final question for you. What is next for you and your community as you fight to end this persecution of Uyghurs in China?
We will continue collaborate with people like Hong Kongers, like Tibetans. We will never give up, and we still have hope that in the end the truth will prevail and the evil will, in the end will fail.
Yeah, I mean, if we've learned anything from history, is that the truth always prevails. Thank you so much for your comments today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.